What's up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of On a Couch Talking Sports, another social distancing edition of On a Couch Talking Sports. As always, I'm Robbie, joined by Kyle, who you'll see in the screen momentarily. Hey, Kyle, how are you, buddy?
Hey, what's up, dude? Not too bad. Just chilling, just hanging out, just waiting for I'm
doing the YMCA, something Macarena.
Yeah, both. I'm trying to,
Macarena, yeah. Yeah, it's all, just when stuck inside, just do as many dance moves as you can. Just makes the time go totally by faster. Anyway, so if you watched last week's episode, you'll remember that we discussed our sophomore year in high school football team, the 2005 Wellesley Raiders football team. And so we wanted to kind of keep that theme going tonight and go back to our very first year of high school, our freshman year, and discuss not only the 2004 Wellesley High School varsity football team, but also the 2004 Wellesley High School freshman football team. And that is because that was the 1 year of high school football, and actually just football in general, that Kyle and I were both on the same team. And so we thought it'd be fun to sort of reminisce about that freshman year team, and also mix in the varsity as well. Given that we both went to their games at different capacities and also had an opportunity, as we've talked about before, to dress for the Thanksgiving game that year. So we'll start out with the freshman team, Kyle. Obviously, that year was sort of a big transition for, all of us on the team, ourselves included, because, not only, we were stepping up to a brand new school, high school, heading into high school, and then, again, going, to play high school football, which is just completely different. I know for me, from 8th grade football, where literally 8th grade football, you start on the first day of school. Yeah. For freshman football, we started, 3 days before school started, and, all that fun stuff. So the first thing I want to sort of talk about is heading into that freshman football season. What were sort of your expectations, being that was your first year in the Wellesley football program in general, and just sort of take us through what, going into that year, what your expectations and mindset was going into that.
Well, so that year was definitely different than the second year because like I said in the past episode, the second year was very intense. I already kind of had expectations going into sophomore year, but then obviously the rug was pulled under me and it ended up being a much crazier beginning. Whereas in this particular case, it was – so I hadn't personally done 8th grade football. In fact, I don't think I haven't done any version of football really prior to really that – I think that year, to be honest, that season.
Yeah.
I haven't even done any football camps or anything, so I didn't even do that till actually the following year, going to the I think it was like the Roxbury Latin football camp. But anyways, that's a whole nother. I'll talk about that another time. But in this particular case, I didn't know what to expect. Having experience in mainly only playing baseball, sports like baseball, swimming, and basketball. I was like, okay, football. It's all right, cool. Hey, let's see what happens. And it was interesting because you're right. Like you said, we had started a bit earlier than the 8th grade season. We were like a couple days, I think, where it was just, it was pretty easy going. They didn't really, we got kind of used to the workouts. It was kind of like a nice, I would say, easy transition, easy-ish to high school because you didn't really have to worry about going to class. You kind of just, you walked on the field, got to meet people you knew since 8th grade, or at least I knew since 8th grade. It was great to have Robbie that year, that semester. So it was kind of a nice, easygoing transition, I'd say. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the thing that was interesting, sort of looking back on it, is that we only had one practice session per day for those first 2 days, whereas
Yeah.
like, for when you move up to the sophomore through senior year, as you were saying last week, you get those 2-a-day practices
Oh,
for
yeah.
2 weeks, 2 weeks, and all that fun stuff. So it definitely, like we've said, it's a lot different sort of build up and preseason for freshman year to sophomore year, definitely from 8th grade to freshman year. But
Yeah.
yeah, and I think, I mean, just looking back on that season, yeah, obviously, it was, the other thing that sort of stood out is there was kind of a drop off in numbers, like between the 8th grade team, where we had like, I don't even remember how many players we had, but we had a lot of players on our 8th grade team, and then it kind of like got cut like in half or more for freshman year, and so it started to kind of
Yeah.
like weed out the you know the players that were really gonna make it all the way make it all the way. And I know, like, for me, that obviously ended up being my only year playing high school football, was that freshman year, and definitely got a good workout in, I remember. But yeah, that season, I remember we started off. I remember we played Brookline the first game. It was kind of like half game, half scrimmage. It was like not really an official game, I remember, but it was more of like it was a game, but yet the coaches were like on the field with us, and like
Yeah.
it was just different. Then we kind of started off, for real, like the next week. I remember, I think we were playing Braintree or something like that. That like
Yeah.
first real week of the season, and that was
Didn't you
tough.
travel
But
to Braintree?
yeah, we traveled
Okay.
to Braintree. We lost a tough game, and the coaches were not too pleased with us after the game. They felt like we kind of like let one slip away. So it was
Yeah.
definitely tough that next week of practice. But yeah, I mean, I think the other thing is, I really liked our freshman coaches, Coach Ash and Coach Corda. Coach
Oh,
Corda I had for 8th grade, so I kind of knew him from then. And then Coach Ash, was just a really good guy, very easy to talk to and stuff like that. And so,
yeah.
yeah, I thought, I mean, let me get your perspective on it, Kyle. Again, I mean, because you hadn't had, obviously, Coach Cord in 8th grade, and obviously both of us were, you know, had Coach Ash for the first time that freshman year. So just sort of what were your sort of impressions of the coaches, initially, and just through that freshman season?
Oh, I love them. I thought
Yeah.
they were amazing. I really liked Coach Ash. Always, to me, he had a very cool head about him. He wasn't like as much like in your face as like other coaches would be, and he was. I always kind of liked his kind of like calm demeanor, but he was also very much like he always wanted you to try your best. He always
Right.
really pushed you, and not having not really known either of them. Like I hadn't really. I don't think I've ever met really either of them, even 8th grade or. Um,
No.
and yeah, I thought they really did a good job at kind of introducing just everyone to just being on a team. The whole concept of football and obviously since I haven't played it, especially Coach Corda. I know he was. I had spent I think more time. I think we had actually spent more time with Corda that year because he was our line coach.
Right.
If I'm correct, right?
Yeah.
So I just I know he was a great line coach. I really liked his we did all like the classic drills. It was also the first time I remember when we used the sled. We hit the sled and we
Yeah.
kind of like pushed it all throughout the field.
Yes, the sled. Yes, I
Yep.
remember that. I remember that sled.
Oh yeah, it was that was the first time. It's just so kind of like I felt like this wide-eyed kid like, ooh, that's a football drill. Ooh, let's see what this does next. And I was just kind of since you had already kind of had a better idea of what was going on. I'm sure in those drills where I was like, oh wow, this is interesting. Ooh, look at these tunnels. Ooh, I get the. um, so yeah, it was just such an interesting experience. You know, it was the first
Yeah.
time I personally had ever been into just any full contact sport like that, and I'll admit it took me a while to kind of warm up to it because you know even though you're in pads, for me being a tall person, it's kind of hard to fall down. This is gonna sound kind of ridiculous, but when you're a tall person, it's you get kind of like a little freaked out when you gotta like when you're in a situation where you might fall down. So it's like I kind of had to like overcome that fear, you know, throughout the season. So
For me, up downs was like the hardest. Was like the hardest thing because it's like I could never like get the full like just fall straight to the ground part down. So I
yeah,
always had to like go to my knees and then down to the ground just because like I could never really grasp that concept of just falling straight down. You know, it was not the easiest thing in the world. But yeah, I mean,
oh yeah, those are tough workouts.
it's kind of funny. Like one of the things I remember most vividly from practice is I don't know if you remember this too, but you and I going one on one and like that one on one like blocking drill or whatever they called it. Not it wasn't like
Oh yeah,
Oklahoma. It wasn't like Oklahoma per se, but it was like a one. Basically, just you and I facing off each other one on one, like trying to push each other back and like
yeah. It
that
was
was
like a lineman pushing contest. Yeah, I know what
yeah.
you mean.
And since you and I are like you and I were friends, it was just kind of cool. Like go up against you. Obviously, you know I remember you kind of beat me handily in in that. So I wasn't the most physical football player, hence why I only played 1 year of high school. But I think obviously the games were a lot of fun. I think we only won like maybe three, maybe four games that year. You know, it was kind of a
Yeah,
I don't think we had a winning record, but still the games were a lot of fun. I mean,
yeah,
going on the road trips and even just playing at home. I remember. I guess I'll sort of do a couple games that stood out for me first, and then you can as well. But one of the games that stood out for me was we were playing Norwood, and it was
oh yeah. That was
snow.
an away
It
game, right?
snowed. No, it was home. It was a home
Oh, okay,
game.
okay.
It had snowed, and it's like that day. So we were playing like on a snowy field for that game, and we got shut out. And it was still pretty wild. Like playing in the snow, like you had to be very careful, like putting your hand down. Like I think I wore gloves that game because it was like really, really like the grass and like the field is really, really cold. Like when you put your hands down, pretty wild. It was pretty wild. I think another game that stands out was Dedham because we kind of killed Dedham. We beat him pretty handily. Uh, and I was like on the field a lot for that game, and I can still remember this day. My mom was saying that like she pulled up to the field and saw me in the game and realized we probably were winning by a lot if I was playing. So, which is true, which is a very valid, true point. And then obviously, I want to kind of hold off on the Needham freshman game until the
Yeah,
end. So I kind of want to throw it to you.
that's its own kind of thing.
Yeah. I want to sort of that could be our sort of next segment. So I want to kind of throw it to you, Kyle. Same thing. Just sort of what were some games when you think back to the freshman team that year that kind of stood out for you?
Well, that's a tricky one. Freshman, I remember a little less because when you play 4 years of football, it's a lot of the games kind of start to like meld together a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate in that sense, but it is interesting because you go through the freshman season and pretty much it's just your class playing versus like I just think it's such a different kind of vibe. It's when it's just your class versus like when you go on the varsity,
Right.
you got three different grades. So it's such a different kind of like angle, I guess, freshman versus varsity. But I guess some of the games that I remember was games like I think did we travel to Newton North? Is that right?
Yes, we did. Yes, we
Yeah,
did that year.
like just kind of seeing all the different kind of like fields like that, like Newton North, and I feel like that was the year where I kind of got a sense of like the schools and like the teams and how tough some of them were versus like you're right, like I remember the Dedham team in Norwood. Um, they weren't quite as hard as some of the other ones like Natick and Newton
Natick,
North.
Natick was really tough. Natick, I remember they kind of blew us out on their field that
Yes.
year. That was pretty tough.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, no, that was not a good game by any means.
Yeah, and you just kind of I just remember some of the away games, Natick um, and even Weymouth. I think that year actually wasn't that tough.
Weymouth, we won. Yeah, Weymouth was one of the two road games that we won besides Needham. I
Yeah,
remember we beat Weymouth. Yeah, that was pretty nice going on the road and getting a victory. Yeah, that was pretty wild.
it was pretty cool. It was and because at that time Weymouth, their football team was pretty okay, but we'll probably get more into it as
They
this
got a
kind of
lot better as high school
yeah.
went along.
Oh yeah,
They got a lot better as high school went along. So yeah, definitely we'll touch on that in future episodes. But I do obviously want to get to what probably was the biggest game of the year, at least in my mind, and that was the Needham game. And
yes.
for those of you who don't know, the way that they do, obviously Wellesley Needham varsity play on Thanksgiving Day. What they do for the freshmen and the JV is they both play a double header, usually at Needham, the Saturday before Thanksgiving. So like
Yeah.
we would play first, and the JV would play after us, and we were the only Wellesley team that beat Needham that year. We shut them out on their home field. I think it was like 14-0 and stuff like that, and it was. Honestly, it was the funnest game of the year by far for me, just because like you're playing
Oh
your
yeah.
rivals, and again, you beat them at their home field, and we were trying to dump. I remember the water jugs on Coach Corda and Coach Ash after the game, and then we get on the bus to go home, and Coach Ash is like whooping it up, and we get there, and we're all just fired up, and it was a pretty sweet moment. Sort of my one taste of actually playing, like physically going on the field for a Wellesley Needham game. We'll touch on the varsity game and how we got to dress in a little bit, but to be able to get that victory and that was pretty cool. And I'm sure Kyle, you have some of your own memories from that game as well. So I'll stop rambling here and let you sort of discuss your memories of that Needham game, for the freshman game against Needham, I should say, from that year.
Yeah, no, it was. I think you said it best. It was very memorable. It was kind of nice to be like the only team that really that won against them that year. I remember that season.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that I personally, I think, have ever played on that field. So that was also a nice experience. Hey, a lot of those were like first time, like first time I went to see the Natick field and everything. And
Yeah.
what was kind of cool too was just kind of in general when I going to like Needham, Natick, and those fields, it kind of also got me it kind of ready for track too. The following track season, I had also gone to Natick, but instead of playing football, doing throwing events like shot putting and discusing. So it was kind of cool. So it was like I was able to kind of experience those different venues through football and through track. So it was kind of nice. I really liked visiting those other schools, and because I think that year we also had traveled to Needham to go to a track meet there. We had an away track meet, so was nice. I liked, obviously I love the Wellesley venue and everything, but I also liked visiting the other venues too and seeing how similar and different a lot of them were. So, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, no, definitely getting to go on those road trips is definitely a fun time for, for during that season. I mean, I remember eighth grade as well. I remember for like eighth grade as well, the road trips were a lot of fun, and freshman year they were as well. And so obviously, like I said, we didn't win that many games, but to be able to sort of close out the season at least with that victory over Needham and get those great memories and also great workout that year was pretty fun. And the varsity, even though they lost on Thanksgiving, which we'll get into that specifically in a moment, they actually, I remember they went 6-5 that year. And so I just wanted to quickly sort of touch for both of us, because you and I kind of had different perspectives on the varsity that season. Myself from, being part of the program as a freshman player, but just sort of watching the games themselves, except for that last one from a fan's perspective, and then you from a band perspective. So just sort of take us through, besides, we'll save Thanksgiving here for just a moment, but from the varsity season, the rest of that varsity season in general, sort of looking at it from your perspective of going to the games as, a pep band member and all, that, so just take us through some of your memories from that season from that perspective.
So, so watching the games from the pep band was a very interesting experience. So when I was at the high school, I had only done concert band for 1 year, and the thing is, when you're in concert band, you're required to do a couple different things for the school, essentially. So I had joined concert band mainly to play in the jazz band, because I love being in the 1 o'clock. They called it the jazz lab at the time, but I think they call it now the 1 o'clock jazz band. So you have the 2 o'clock and the 1 o'clock. The 2 o'clock is like the really good ones. Like, oh yeah, the really talented. Like these guys will probably go to Berkeley type of, and then the jazz lab is kind of more, I'd say, like the JV version of the jazz band. But anyways, I'll talk about that maybe another episode too. That's a whole other discussion. But the two things that they required you to do when you were in concert band was the marching band. They had you go in the Wellesley parade later on that year to march around town, and to be in the pep band. So basically, when I was in the pep band, we would play on the bleachers, and we'd play all these like songs that basically like stadium songs. Like hear, like we'd play like I'm trying to think, like just basically like songs you'd hear in like a lot of sports venues. And we had like the fight song, which was like the touchdown. I think it was like the Wellesley. Yeah, it was like the Wellesley fight song where we cheer the players on. We'd have the touchdown song. We'd have like we'd have like a bunch of different like just sports. I'm trying to remember all the.
Well, the only one that I remember is specifically, and I think they still actually do this song to this day, is when the team's coming out on the field, they do the Darth Vader Death Star song.
Oh yes, the Imperial March. Yep, they did the Imperial March whenever Wellesley would appear on the field, which was fantastic. That was like our intro song. That was so badass. It was just like the players would just be running and with the Darth Vader theme on. It was great. It was just so kind of unreal when I'd be up there playing with the pep band while the team was going out, and then only flash forward to the season after, running with the team while that team would be playing. So it was kind of unreal in both regards, in both perspectives. So yeah, it was honestly, being the pep band was a lot of fun. It was very quick. You had to be very quick. It was a lot of it was timing. So whenever there'd be maybe a timeout, I remember what was his name? Mr. Scott. I think he was the band leader at the time. He'd be very good at queuing us. Okay, when we got to play and everything. So we do like these quick like songs here and there between like plays and during timeouts, and it was a lot of fun. It was I had a great time. It really kept me on my toes, just playing the songs and getting all the timing, the rhythms down and everything, and just talking to the the bandmates. It was a lot of fun. I had a really good time actually, just watching the game and playing. It was very
Yeah, that is a really cool perspective to have, because while you're not on the field, you are still like kind of involved in the game in a sense, because obviously, you're sort of the soundtrack to to game, so to
yeah.
speak. I
Oh,
think
and I played saxophone, by
yeah.
the way. Sorry. If any of you are asking which instrument I played, I played the tenor sax. So that's what I did in concert band and jazz. So yeah.
Got it. I think for me, the things that kind of stand out is, first of all, that was the first year that they did night games
Oh
for the
yeah.
high school games. So I remember like getting back for our game against Brookline and like kind of getting changed and having some dinner, and then going back to the varsity game, which was really, really fun, and they won, and that was really cool. I remember the Natick game, because like Natick was pretty good that year, and we beat them at home, and it was like a pretty wild game. And I also remember, for a different reason, I remember the New North game, which I think I went to like the first half of the varsity New North game, and that was because my sister Sarah, who you guys have seen on several of our broadcasts, actually did a cheerleading clinic on that day. And part of the cheerleading clinic was they got to cheer at the game against New North that year, so that was pretty cool to like
Oh yeah, I think I
be
remember
able
that.
to
Yeah.
see her out there. She also got to cheer at the Thanksgiving game, which was another cool experience.
No,
So yeah, I think those were the ones that like really stood out for me. I think those were like really the games that I went to that year. But so it was, it was a lot of fun. So I think that kind of leads us into the Thanksgiving game that year, because I think I mentioned this in past episodes, is that the tradition at Wellesley High is that the freshman team can choose to practice with the varsity the days leading up to Thanksgiving, and then actually like be on the field, dressed in full gear for that Thanksgiving game. And so Kyle and I both took advantage of that opportunity, and were on the field for practice leading up to the game, and the events, leading up to the game, and then the game itself. And I think the things that really stood out for me were actually sort of like the build up to the game itself was awesome, even though we lost. It was still really cool, like be on the field for that environment.
Oh
But
yeah.
I think the thing for me was like just the events like leading up to it. Like you had like they had this like brunch like the Sunday before, like we all got dressed up and like went to the Wellesley Country Club and had a brunch, and like
It was like that big buffet, right?
yeah, exactly. Then you got to like kind of sit through like the build up to the game, and even just like little events like leading up to the game, like they chose the captains, I remember, in a vote for the next year, and like just all these different things. Like again, it was just pretty wild, like to be part of that, and just to be like a game that you had grown up going to, and like all the history and tradition behind it, be able to for that 1 year to like be on the field and be like part of it in that sort of direct fashion. Again, even though we lost, was still something I'll never forget. It was really exciting seeing that was, I knew that was going to be my, one and only time being on the field for that game. So yeah, Kyle, let's sort of, take us back for your memories of that sort of that week. Being able to practice with the varsity and go through all that, but also being able to be on the field for the game as well.
Well, it was really cool because it kind of gave me kind of a bit of a sample of like what the next year was going to be like. So it was kind of cool, like having just for a brief period of time, like kind of having like to just kind of like meet, talk to the players that I'd be playing with the season after. It was a really great experience. It was a great build up, and I mean it was the first Thanksgiving game that I have ever experienced, and I didn't really know how I didn't realize how how old how far back these Thanksgiving games went, and just going to my first one, suiting up and everything was just it was a great experience. It really was, and there wasn't really anything like it, at that season, and I just remember I was so excited. I was just so excited just to be on the sideline like you, um, and it was interesting because the pep band was also playing at that game, but that was the only game throughout the year that I hadn't actually joined the pep band
True.
on. So.
True. Good point. I'm
So
sure
it
it
was
was also
interesting.
the other. I'm sure it was also the only game where the visiting team's pep band was also at the game that the Wellesley pep band was at, because they kind of like it was like kind of the battle of the bands.
Oh yeah, it was great. It was great hearing like both bands play between like plays and everything. It was great, and I had to ditch my red pep band jacket. I didn't tell you guys, but when you were on a pep band, you got this kind of like it was kind of like a jacket vest kind of deal. Like it was like bright red, almost like a windbreaker, and like you'd attach these like little tiny like stands that would like hold your sheets of music, so you'd be like flipping through it, but like trying to find the right song. It was just kind of it was just a fun experience in that sense, and it was just kind of funny that I was like, okay guys, nope, I gotta toss those aside because I'm going to be on the field. Yeah.
Yeah. Woo. um, yeah. I mean, it was like I said, it was just a really cool
Yeah.
experience. And I mean that whole season, I definitely look back on fondly, even though, like I said, it was the only year that I played high school football. I mean, I definitely look back at that experience fondly, and
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely. Honestly, I would not change anything if I went back. I think it was a great sort of one year wonder of high school football for me. So it was really nice to be able to do that and have those memories
Yeah.
going forward. So definitely, again, like just sort of all 4 years of football in high school sort of were, had memories sort of in their own right. Again, looking at it from different perspectives, but that freshman year was, like I said, definitely something special looking back on it. So we're now going to start to sort of wrap up our episode, and I'm going to do my final thought, as I always do. And my final thought is this, is that there is traction. I don't know how much traction, but there is traction on Major League Baseball returning in
Oh.
2020. Today, the MLB owners approved a plan to begin the season, the regular season, I should say, in July,
Okay.
and play an 82 game season, and at least to start, or at least for the first, for the first decent amount, maybe even the whole season, have no fans in the stands, but still play the games in the team's home ballparks. So obviously, it's not a done deal by any means. The Players Association still has to approve it, so they'll
Hmm.
sort of go through that process and see what happens. But it definitely at least raises your hope somewhat that you might actually get some live sports coming back at some point in the somewhat near future. Given this development, but obviously, the players have to make their decision, and obviously, you want to make sure that they want to make sure. I'm sure that everything's going to be done in a safe way, and it would be nice to have live sports back, but as always with this, sort of situation that we're in, it's just kind of a wait and see process, and at least the good news is that they've made some traction, at least, rather than just talking about. They're actually starting to act on it. But again, just we'll have to sort of wait and see what happens with that. So that's sort of my final thought. Just at least there's some hope that baseball may be coming back at some point. Again, we'll have to cross our fingers, wait and see what happens. But Kyle, let me now throw it over to you for another rousing edition of the Sue's Reviews. So what have you got for us?
All right, so today I want to talk about a movie that I saw fairly recently, a few nights ago. It's this movie called Shoplifters. It came out back in 2018. It's actually it's a Japanese movie that has some kind of similar themes to one of the movies I talked about, Parasite. But it's not really the same. I'm not going to say it's the same movie. It's still a very different movie, but it has some similar themes of like kind of poverty. So basically, the premise of the movie is it follows this this group of people who are impoverished, and they're just kind of living on the streets. They had found this kind of like ramshackle home, and essentially they live together in this home, but they're not technically related. They just kind of found each other, and you kind of learn more about them as they go along, and how kind of like they weren't living in the best situations beforehand. So that's kind of why they banded together, and just to kind of get by. And you get to know more of like the two younger members, two of them who are kids actually, and this guy who's kind of like he's the main character. He's essentially like the guardian of those two kids. He teaches them how to shoplift, so hence the name, Shoplifters. So it's a very good movie. I really enjoyed it. I was very surprised. I went into it with literally no expectations. Only I mean, I heard some good reviews here and there, but it wasn't like a movie as talked about as Parasite. I highly recommend you guys watch it. It's a very good time. It's only a few hours. It's only like 2 hours, but I really like the overall themes. I don't want to get too much in the story because I don't want to get too much into the story.
I didn't want to say anything, but yeah, I could see that there was guest appearance going on back there.
Nice cameo.
Just out of curiosity, who was that?
Oh, that was Ben.
Okay, that's what I thought, but like he was covered by a hood, so I wasn't sure.
He was incognito.
Yeah, shout out Ben. Welcome. Thanks for appearing on Auto Couch Talking Sports.
Oh yeah, it's his one-time cameo, and let's let him come back. I told him he can come back anytime, so hopefully we'll get him back in the future.
It's an open-ended invite. All right. Anyway, continue.
But no, it's a great movie. It is a bit of a tearjerker. I'm not gonna lie. I did get a little teared up, during certain scenes because, you have this band of people who are like looking out for each other, but then they get into a lot of obstacles and everything. And obviously, if you're you're someone who's teaching like kids to shoplift, obviously that's going to have consequences. So you kind of see how everything plays out, and the movie really goes through like a lot of themes about who your family is, and how these people really aren't bad. They're just they're looking out for each other, and they're picking each other up from from worse situations. And I really like those overall themes, and I highly recommend watching it. The acting is phenomenal from everyone, the adult and the kid actors. And it is in Japanese, so if you don't mind some subtitles, or maybe you can dub it. But honestly, when it comes to foreign movies, I'm personally a fan of subtitles. I like hearing the original actor's voice. That's just my preference. But I'm sure if you can find on DVD, Blu-ray, or streaming, I'm sure there's options for all that. So you can either dub or
but Kyle, just as long, that's all good enough. Just as long as you're not turning Japanese.
Not anytime soon, no.
Sorry, had to drop that reference in there.
No. No, that's perfect. No, that was it. Yeah, no, I just if you're looking for something to watch, and you've gone through all your movies and shows, then definitely check that out. It's Under the Radar. Very good, though. Very, very good.
Very nice. Well, thank you, Kyle, as always, for that lovely review. And again, thank you to Ben for that lovely cameo appearance.
I'll get him on the show. Hopefully he'll come on the show. He knows a lot about sports, so.
Yeah. I still haven't figured out the trivia question that he asked me. But anyway, that's for another time. So that's going to do it for this edition of On a Couch Talking Sports. Again, social distancing edition. Hope everybody stays safe and well out there. And yeah, so for Kyle, I'm Robbie. Wait, there we go. I'm Robbie. Yeah. That's Kyle. You couldn't see my hands there for a second. There we go. Gotta love my professional camera work. Anyway, for the third time, for Kyle, I'm Robbie, signing off here from a chair. But this is On a Couch Talking Sports, and we will see you next time on a Couch Talking Sports. Bye, everybody.
See you guys.